This is it. This is it. This is it. This is it. Hello, Toronto. Hello. And thanks for having me here. I was pretty pumped to be joining CyberX CISO Forum today, especially because I'm local. I'm here from Toronto. I decided to be here in Toronto. I think we as Canadians and Torontonians, we take for granted a lot of the cool things about this city. But come on, the country in general. Amazing beer, one of the reasons I chose this country. Great skiing, but more important, just fantastic people, right? And all the other places in the world that I visited, and I've been traveling a lot for Savient, the company I work for today. I have been asked, friends, family, they ask me, Enrique, are you going to be living in Toronto forever? So, well, yes, until I find a better place, and I haven't. So we should be proud of our city. Come on, Toronto. Very proud. We're going to be talking about this, more human than human. I don't know if you recognize this particular phrase, and I'm old. Well, I'm getting old. And I was born in an era where people saw Blade Runner on the movies, on the movie theater. How many of you have seen Blade Runner here? So more human than human. Yes, thank you. Boomers, or anyway. It's an amazing movie, and it tells this interesting story about how a synthetic being can be undistinguishable. And that's a word I had to practice because I'm not a native English speaker. But give me 5 minutes, the accent will go away. But that's a very interesting and intriguing type of story where replicants and humans, side by side, you can't even tell the difference. You can't tell them apart. I am a senior vice president of strategy at Savient. I run the roadmap of the products. I run where we go as a company. Are we aligned with the problems of CISOs in 2024, 2025, and beyond? Are we align our initiatives, our priorities with your priorities? Before joining Savient, I was a Gartner analyst. And please don't use this against me. But I used to write a lot of research on identity and access management. That's my whole background. I am pretty useless elsewhere outside of identity in the whole world of cybersecurity. I know you CISOs, you have this amazing job. And I was having this discussion just this morning. How difficult of a job of a CISO of having the reward, of helping other people, helping our organizations, but at the expense of our time away from family, also the risks of getting jailed. And talking about that movie, Blade Runner, right? The first edition, not the 2049 one, but the first run of that movie, Blade Runner, there was, and by the way, this is not how much they made in profits for that movie. Who knows what that $100 billion means? Do you know? This was what Microsoft and OpenAI said. This is the definition of AGI, artificial general intelligence. So they say, AGI is a system that can make $100 billion in profit. When we achieve that number, that's AGI, which is quite funny to define a whole market, to define a whole technology of evolution based on revenue, but that's what they did. But they also said this, AGI, which is also known as singularity, is going to be the moment where machines can do more stuff than humans. It's quite mind-blowing to think about this. I think the general ChatGPT 3.0 is already better than I am, especially putting words together, but a lot worse in other things. But this is what this presentation is about. And what I promise you here is that when you saw the program, the pamphlet for this session here today, you saw three things. You saw a riveting story about AI, identity, and machines. So I want you to come out of here understanding at least the connection of those three things. When we think about machine, okay, there are two types of machines. There are the devices, which could be the Boston Scientific robot dogs that you may have seen it. It could be our phones. It could be a PlayStation 5. Those are devices. They have their own identity. They have an IP address. They have credentials. They have ID. And there are the workloads, which is the software side of machine identities. It could be a Lambda function in AWS. It could be an S3 bucket. It could be an EC2 instance. Okay? We're going to be talking more about the workload type of machines here. And when we think about the identity types of machine identities that are workload-based, there are several examples, including an application. So if you are using Salesforce, there are machine identities that exist to run that service for you. Or things like another service running on a Unix box, or an RPA agent, a robotic processing automation agent, that's a machine identity. Or an AI agent. Who has heard about this definition of AI agent here? Have you heard about this? Yes. So it is somewhat of an evolution of a copilot, if you will, in a very simplistic way to explain this. Instead of just generating code, generating text, or generating images as Gen AI can do, this type of agent, it can execute tasks for us. So it could be an HR agent. You're going to be doing hiring and firing of people, moving people around. But it could be something like, hey, an AI travel agent. They're going to book hotels, cars, and attractions and tours for you. Okay? What's interesting, and this is quite small to read, but I'll get to the point of the fine print. Kupping Cole, an analyst firm, it's predicting that this AI agent alone, among all the other types of identities here, okay? It's a whole market predicted to grow from $5 billion today. They are already making $5 billion of revenue today just with agents AI. It's going to reach $47 billion by 2030. So very much on the way of the prediction that we saw. So among all the types of machine identities, I have my own conclusions that I can take from this. Guess what is going to be achieving that type of singularity we spoke about? I think it's here. I think that's the type of machine that's going to be able to perform perhaps things more efficiently than we can do as humans. And perhaps not only one agent alone, it could be a swarm of agents, a team of agents working under you as an employee of your company. It could be also a team of agents as your clients, as machine consumers as well. What happens with a machine identity is that they have accounts, very similar to humans. And you're going to see that the moment we get from this point to the right, it looks very similar to a human identity. What are types of machine accounts? It could be a username and a password. It could be an an infrastructure as a service account in AWS. It could be a service account within Salesforce. And they carry credentials, which is the way for that account to authenticate themselves. It could be a more sophisticated thing like a X509 certificate, a digital certificate. It could be an API key. It could be a plain username and password, like humans. But also entitlements. Entitlements are the permissions, the privileges of what that machine can do in your environment. Okay? That's important for us to understand as we move on with the journey of this presentation. The journey we're going to be talking about here today, especially today, in 2025, is this. When I speak to my friend CISOs, and I want to know if you feel the same about that, is that for the last 20 years, they have been dealing with a lot of compliance type of controls because of this here, right? If you remember, if we roll back in the year 2000s, Enron in the US, there was fraud. So a lot of the compliance, like SOX, it was born in the year 2000. Exactly the same time frame where cloud was invented. Yes, Salesforce was invented in the year 2000. And ServiceNow, not too far after that. But here, in 2025, a bunch of interesting things happened not too long ago. We had COVID, right? Everybody here saw that dramatic change in our lives, but also we saw a significant amount of attacks, and especially all the breaches that we saw, the vast majority of breaches, they were identity related. That was the combination here. This inflection point was when 67% of attacks and breaches, they were through credential misuse. At the same time, Gen AI became mainstream. I remember my mom calling me, Enrique, what is this ChatGPT thing? I remember vividly that day. I said, wow. And she's a doctor. So doctors, lawyers using AI. I think that's a very interesting litmus test if something is mainstream or not. Okay? They're not cybersecurity experts. They're not even IT experts. And here's another prediction that I make here, right? So as we move from efficiency and compliance, I see more and more CISOs saying, Enrique, I think my priority moving forward, on top of everything that I'm already doing for compliance and efficiency, I gotta be more threat aware. And that's the shift in priorities that we're starting to see. It's not the fact that compliance is no longer important. It is still important, but attacks became the next big things in the minds of CISOs. When I had discussions at Gartner, and I had those, sometimes 20, 50 CISOs a week that I spoke, and say, Enrique, I don't want to get breached. Nobody wants. And that was the number one question I had to answer. How do I avoid that? My prediction, and I can guarantee you, this is a promise, and you can write my name under it. This last wave is not going to be the last one. It's going to be another one. And I also guarantee it's not going to take 20 years. It's going to be much shorter, okay? And you see here singularity. I was thinking in my very naive mind, man, it's impossible this is going to take 20 years. By the velocity that we saw ChatGPT get this massive mainstream adoption, it's going to take 5 years maximum. And ignorant me, there was another guy called Ray Kurzweil, and I'm butchering his name, I think, because I've done that in the past. Do you guys know Ray Kurzweil? He's a researcher. He's been studying AI for 60 years, professor. And he said the same thing. Actually, he wrote a book saying singularity is coming in 2045. Then he scratched that and said, no, it's much faster. It's going to be 2029. So my predictions match his. You're going to take my word for it, because I was thinking the same thing even without knowing him very well. And what led me to think about that whole prediction is this. If you look at data from Cloudflare, this statistics coming from Cloudflare is that the traffic on the internet is already more about machines than humans. It's more machines than humans. About 57% of the traffic on the internet, they're machine-to-machine, API-driven, than user HTTP-based. Okay? What's happening is that more machines, meaning more attacks using machines, more effort that we have to do for user provisioning of machines, more traffic, more internet traffic, more firewall rules, everything is going to dedicate more time of our lives to those machines than humans. What's interesting as well, I don't know if you saw this, But if you are using today the OWASP Top 10 Cybersecurity Risk Matrix for protection of your environment, they have released just this month an OWASP Top 10 NHI risks, which is non-human identity risks. A lot of the green stuff there are very, very similar to human identity risks. Things like secrets that are long-lived, or overprivileged NHIs. Same thing as an employee that stays 15 years in the same job, they overaccumulate privileges, they never lose privileges. The secret leakage, NHI reuse. There are a few examples, and that's listed by OWASP. Okay, I didn't invent those three things here. One was the Microsoft Midnight Blizzard. And I gotta take my hats off to Microsoft here, right? Because they got breached in a very bad way because of NHIs. But what Microsoft does is to turn things and make this almost like a case study in a very open way. The way they treated the incident, I say, wow, this is good for researchers. This is good for analysis. So look how we have been breached. We can learn from mistakes and we move on. That was a very good move here from Microsoft when that happened. In summary of that introduction of the journey that we're going to see here is that the world as it's spinning today, yes, we got to still protect our workforce, our external users, our contractors, supply chain providers, our consumers, but we have this latent ticking bomb, if you will, of machines. And every time I speak with these CISOs that I speak every week, they say, yeah, Enrique, I know. Enrique, I know. The problem is there. I'm gonna eventually get to it. It's like my wife saying, Enrique, that faucet is leaking. I'm gonna get to it. You don't have to remind me every 6 months. Right? And what's the complication of that? Postponing of an event, right? The things that we used to do for our employees, for our consumers, the problems are still the same, but the solutions no longer apply. So how can you tell an EC2 instance to press a button for MFA? You can't. Or things that are so ingrained in our minds. For example, we gotta block every tentative of impossible travel. But machines, they can. Machines, they can be in two places at the same time. So how do we solve this type of problems? And not even to count about the cognitive overload of those signals. As research has shown us, and depending on who you're talking to, it can vary from 20 to 40 times the number of machines for one human. It's 40 to 1. So that alone, it makes us think, right? We need different tools. We need a new approach for this. When we look at this whole thing about agentic AI, introduced by Salesforce and others, right? We have Microsoft with the Microsoft Copilot Studio. Who has used here any of those studios for AI? Things like AWS, Bedrock, right? And other things. It is amazing. It's giving this democratization of technology to the hands of citizen developers, non-IT people. They can build those agents for doing all this boring stuff that we don't want to do, which is amazing. Add emails, correct my own grammar mistakes, research content, generate code. What's happening here, it's a very human problem of hard-coded, high-privileged credentials. Same thing of long-standing permissions. All the zero-standing type of goal, we haven't achieved that with machines yet. And guess what? Those hard-coded credentials, a very basic mistake, could be abused. An attacker will find your agent and make the agent work for them. It could be stealing data. It could be generating malicious code, malware, or just denial of service. Just say, ask the robot to do all this crazy stuff until it breaks. what's also interesting here is that there's no human resources for machines. When we think about humans, we can have multiple authoritative sources. We have our HR files, we have our vendor management systems, we have our customer CRM databases, and we use that. We suck all that data into identity governance tools. We do provisioning, lifecycle management, which is pretty, but there's no such thing for machines. Gartner also said that CMDB, which is a configuration management database, they're failing 75% of the time. Just to find out where machines are, it's not working. And the reason is, the way they described it is, most organizations are using CMDBs in a way that is not focusing on the most value for the organization. They try to do everything. So yeah, I think it's everything we need to do, but it's not really focusing on the most important things. What I'll suggest you to do, if you have a CMDB initiative today, I say, fix one thing. Let's focus on this list of machines that exist, and there are different types of machines that we saw. As part of that solution, by creating this inventory of machines that exist, is already a big achievement. And I'm not saying it's easy, okay? But the big portion of this solution is this green box here. It is about creating this ownership relationship between a human and a machine. Yes, we own the machines. It's kind of scary for me to say that on stage, because they could come back into the future and kill me. But yes, we must be very clear about this. We own machines. They're things, they're not people. They are creating this with names of cute names of people, but they're not people. They're things, and we own those things. Guys, believe me, that's the only way. 3 steps to fix that problem with ownership. Number 1 is to find out where they are. Find where those machines exist. And using AI for doing that is the best way of doing it. Just scan everything that you have here. You scan networks, you scan databases, you scan SaaS applications, you scan your cloud infrastructure. Number 1, finding them. Number 2, protect them. Because guess what? Those AI agents, they're super privileged. Think about this. They can do things on your behalf. It's like you signing a power of attorney to somebody that is not even a person. It's a thing. And then govern it. Find it, protect it in a vault as a privileged account it is, and then govern it. Govern by ownership. So every machine needs an owner. Let me repeat that. Every machine needs an owner. Because when we're running certification campaigns of users, that's the only way you can recertify the privileges and the activity of those machines as well. So you're going to ask the owner, do you need all those machines working for you? All those robots calling you master? So no. So this is how we solve this. This piece of research here, which is super small to read, also came from Gartner. And this was not even written by the cybersecurity team. And you can look it up later. I think we have a copy of this later. But the Gartner AI team, so people that write research about AI, they say, yeah, if we are dealing with AI agents, you got to incorporate the same life cycle process of those identities together with your humans. Okay? This guy too, another leather jacket. I call him the NVIDIA guy. NVIDIA guy. And he said this is a funny sentence because, you know, English is my second language. And I was showing this to my son and said, Lucas, this is kind of revolutionary, eh? Look at this. IT will become the HR of AI agents. And I said, Dad, is that IT or is it? Who is it? It will become, so no, it's IT. So I have to Google it. No, so for the record, it means IT, okay? IT will become a very smart boy. I said, yeah, is it it? No. Information technology will become the HR of AI agents. So it's kind of our job. We become the HR of those robots. So I think that's a big step into the direction of where I want to take us. The AI agent, this elusive new entity that Microsoft, AWS, Salesforce, and ServiceNow are talking about, is just another machine. It is a glorified RPA, if you will. And there's a lot of interesting opportunities that we're starting to see that we must be cognizant. And yes, take the opportunity here. There's an opportunity that applications are dead. Apps are dead. That's what Mark Benioff is saying. Apps are dead. You interact with an AI agent. It's a AI agent. I need to book my trip to Mont Tremblant. I want to ski with my family, 4 people, 7-year-old, 11-year-old, boom. The thing happens. Car, hotel, everything, lift tickets. The AI, no interaction with an app. It's a thing. They'll take care of the boring stuff. And please, this is just my ask to you guys. Let's make AI do more boring stuff. Leave the art, leave the music aside, leave the writing poetry to us, humans. Let them do the boring stuff. They can browse multiple websites at once, they can scroll to death as much as they want, and their brains will remain intact. But the big takeaway here, the opportunity for us, which by the way is a question I want to ask to this audience here. How many of you here are my folks in identity? How many of you have this identity background as I am? Okay, I would say, for the record here on audio, perhaps 5%. Do you agree with this one? AI agents, they are more powerful than single sign-on. So if you remember 2005 when Okta came with SAML and actually making SAML more easy to use, this is going to be 100 times that. An agent, forget about SSO. We don't even think about SSO anymore. It's more power than SSO. But of course, there's always 2 sides to the same coin, right? The risks of this new machine identity in our lives. Misconfigurations. Remember, we're talking about citizen developers, not their fault. And I'm not here to throw shade in any vendor. I respect them very much. It's a super difficult world to walk around with an X in your backs and attackers are after you, and state-sponsored attackers. But take, for example, what Okta did. Say, well, it was hard-coded credentials inside a HAR file. Citizen developers, they won't know better. So there's a big chance of misconfigurations here. And yes, the same way that we can be more productive with AI, the attackers can also be more productive, using the same AI to attack us. They can discover your secrets faster. So when I speak with my CISO friends, say, Enrique, yes, I'm going to get to that eventually. Well, the hacker is already getting to that right now. They're already using it. That's why I say AI agents, they're more dangerous than SSO. Because you remember, if you are in the identity space as long as I have, there was a time to say, oh, I don't want to implement SSO ever. Are you crazy? All the keys to the kingdom in one central place? It sounded kind of crazy and scary. Eventually, we built controls on top of that. We built MFA. Then we built phishing-resistant MFA. And it works. It's the best solution we have so far. This is going to be another thing gotta think about in the future. I think the takeaway of this slide here is that we cannot afford to not use AI to fight those risks because the attackers are already using AI. So I always like to end with a lift type of things that you can take away and execute today. Now, back to 2025. We went all the way to the future in Blade Runner. So for this year, there are strategies that we can execute for AI and identity. The first one is to bring everyone and everything together, the machines and humans. And remember, we are the owners of the machines. And we do that by creating this HR, the human resources, of everything, centralizing authoritative sources for all the machines, all the humans. The second one, it's about using AI to protect AI. And how? The 3 steps that I explained before. Using AI to protect AI through visibility, protect it in a vault, govern it. And the third piece is prepare for this agentic, singularity with things that exist today. Okay? So when we think about singularity, yes, it sounds scary, but I showed you that co-pilots, AI agents, they all use entitlements, they all use API keys, OAuth 2.0 tokens, digital certificates, and we know how to protect them. There's no reason we shouldn't be doing that already. So when we think about these 3 elements that we spoke about in the beginning, of machines, identity, and AI, what I wanted to do when you go home after this session, perhaps after the cocktail, is to talk about the elephant in the room or the non-human identity in the room. Don't postpone it 6 months, okay? And when we think about how to approach this conversation, especially with known security people, known IT people, we got to understand every coin has 2 sides. It's the same way I'm using identity and AI for security. Guys, I work for Savient, and we do that for a living, right? So we use AI as a way to secure your environment. But there's the other side of that coin. It's using your security to protect your environment. It's kind of an interesting concept. Use security to protect identities and AI, but also use identities as your leading way for cybersecurity. Guess what? Guess what concept in cybersecurity says, yes, you need to have a pillar of identity context for your cybersecurity decisions? The answer is zero trust. So we're back to the same elements that we discussed for a decade at this point. And in the center of this, we must remember the machines and identities are part of that same problem that we need to protect. Again, my name is Enrique Teixeira. I work for this company called Savient. Machine identity, AI, all these things are top of mind for us because it's top of mind of our clients. So if you have had the chance to come at the booth, come and talk to us. I'm local here, by the way. I mentioned to you, I'm in Toronto, but I'm super, super grateful for your humorous, but also your welcoming, and you make me proud as a Canadian. So thank you very much. I was very happy to meet you. You're a great audience. Thank you very much.